everyone, welcome to the Light Gate. We are coming to you tonight from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We are on Roku, Facebook, and YouTube. We are shooting around the world, and not everybody gets to see us. A lot of you are hearing us only. So if we show film or anything that's visual, we will explain it to you and give you a really good description. I'm so excited about this show this week. We have a wonderful author aboard with us with a very important case from Australia. I'm excited. So I'm just going to kick it straight over to Preston. There you go.
Caught it. All right. Thank you, Dolly. Thank you all for joining us tonight on episode 48 of The Light Gate. Pretty excited about today's guest. I, of course, am Preston Dennett, your host. My lovely co-host is the irrepressible and very funny Dolly Safran. You are. You make me laugh. And yeah, so excited to have you all joining us tonight for what promises to be a really amazing show. I've known about our guest for a while. I've seen him on a few other podcasts. The case he is going to be talking about tonight is a huge case. He's the go-to guy, and we'll get more into that in just a second. But first, I do want to say hi to all you guys in chat because, as I say each week, it's because of you we do this show. I consider you my friends, my family, really. Actually, I think I have an actual family member in chat tonight. So yeah, I mean, you guys mean a lot. So let me see, who do we have here today? We have Brian Morgan first in. Thank you so much. And Chemtrails MN. Preston is the best. Oh, shucks. Thank you very much. So kind of you. Hello, Dawn. And we have Louise. Oh, okay.
I don't know how to do that.
And I already said hello to Dawn, but there she is again. And namaste and his endless, unbelievable generosity. I've been a good boy, apparently, to deserve you. Thank you so much. Who else do we have here? Kayleen. You want to try and pronounce that last name, Dolly? Gwynmither.
Yeah.
All the way from Australia. I love that name, by the way.
I like it. Yes.
Our guest is from Australia, so that's very cool. Fun Talks TV, all the way from Poland. Hello. I'll never be able to remember that. I'll try. Okay. Octopus with no friends. Thank you for joining us. And here's my dear sweet sister-in-law and the artist for many of my books, including this one, shameless plug, Humanoids at High Strangeness. Love that cover. Thank you, Christy. And of course, this one, which just came out, Not From Here, Volume 5, with the Anunnaki on the front. So thank you, Christy. Your artwork has pushed that book up on the bestseller list. I really think it's you. Okay, who else do we have here? Natasha Stone. Hello. And oh yeah, Kayleen remembers the Valentich case when it actually happened. That's awesome. Wow. Raul Melendez, so happy to be here, he says, excited about tonight's program. Yes, me too, and thanks so much for joining us, and thanks even more for your incredible generosity. You guys, it means a lot. This show does cost us a little bit to produce, and it helps a lot when we get these really wonderful donations. So thank you so much. All right. Who else do we got going on here? Christine. Oops, I mispronounced your name. Sorry. Chris. Team.
Let me see it. Okay.
And
Dennis
Whipple. Hello. And Finn and W. Decker and Phil Emery. Hi, Preston. I hope you are both well. Great to catch you live. Phil from the UK. Wow. Awesome. Thanks for staying up. I know it's late there. I'm going to have to ask our guest what time it is in Australia because
tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. Right. Yeah.
All right. Who else do we got? Kason Lee and Chris and Jacques, and Octopus with No Friends. Let's see, Janice Connet, hello. And
hello, Janice.
James and Follow the Bear. Hey, Dolly, Kenny here.
That's my godson. I love you.
Oh, very cool. Hi, Kenny. Very cool. Christine says, you are such an awesome artist, Christine. Two Christines. Rick Schatz, hello. I better get started or I'm going to get in trouble because Dolly doesn't want me to spend any more than 5 minutes doing this, and I just can't help it. There's so many of you. Walking Trees and Susan Alloway. Yay, so glad you could join us. Oh gosh, Rick, thank you. That's so unbelievably generous. Gosh, you guys, you just warm my heart. So thank you, thank you, thank you. But yes, let's get started with our show. Let me pull up the banner and that'll give you a little bit of a clue. And let me find the bio and introduce our guest. Here it is. Okay, tonight our guest is author and researcher George Simpson. So we're very happy to have him here on the Lightgate. George was born in Melbourne, Australia, and has had a lifelong interest in the subject of UFOs since seeing one together with his sisters in 1967. Ooh, I think I want to start there. He read the book UFOs, Where Do They Come From? By Richard Tambling in 1969 while in primary school. Wow, he got an early start on this subject. I'm a little jealous. He witnessed the initial part of the final flight of Frederick Valentich on October 21st, 1978 from his family home in Beaumaris. He became a member of VUFORS, the Victorian UFO Research Society, in 1987, just after the Knowles Case was reported in the news. For those of you who don't know, Faye Knowles and her 3 sons, I think it was, were driving down some remote highway through the deserts of Australia when a UFO came down and basically chased them down the highway and lifted up their car. Huge case. So yeah, he became a member of VUFORS in 1987 just after that case. He later, George, joined the VUFORS committee as a photographic consultant, listed as photographic officer in 1992, and served on that committee for the following 8 years, then set up the Victorian branch of AUFORN, the Australian UFO Research Network. That was in the year 2000, ran investigations, and followed up hundreds of sighting reports over the next 14 years. So he knows his subject. He's run 4 public meetings each year during that period as the director for the state of Victoria. During this period, he also wrote a regular column titled What's Next, which was followed by Now Then for the Ufologist magazine from 2000 until the magazine closed in February 2018. He's participated in the research, assistance, and filming of the first episode of the Science Channel production of Unexplained Files. That was in March 2013, which examined the Frederick Valentich mystery. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, the mysterious disappearance of Frederick Valentich during a UFO encounter. And George Simpson's book, Nothing on Radar, The Valentich Mystery, here it is the most comprehensive book on what has come to be one of Australia's most enduring and puzzling encounters. So we got a lot to talk about tonight. I'm super excited to have our guest, and let me just bring him on. Here he is. George, thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be your guest. Preston, you've written so many books on the subject. It's incredible how many books you turn out. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I think when you love it, it's not work. I don't know. I'm obsessed. I've got a problem.
Oh, no. My wife says I don't have interests. I have obsessions.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I know the feelings. So how are you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, it's a beautiful day here in Melbourne, Australia. It's about 20 past midday here right now.
All right. Wow.
So I have a day off work today, which is good. I get the occasional day off. It stops people from getting grumpy if they get a day off now and then. So they understand that. You mentioned the book, Richard Tambling's book, Flying Saucers. Where do they come from? Look, I still have a copy of it.
Wow.
Wow.
I don't have that one. I've got a lot of them, but I don't have that one.
Yeah, it's a pretty rare book, but it's still out there in the bookshops, I guess.
Very cool. Yeah. I'm going to have to check it out.
The first book I ever read, when I was in primary school.
All right. Well, I'm excited to talk to you about the Valentich case and all the other research you've done in your own sighting. But like I mentioned before the show, I like to ask the guests how they got involved in this field, what they were like as little kids. Did they believe in this? How did it all roll out for you? What brought you from a kid to this path here, to this show, writing a book and all of your UFO research?
It's a very interesting way to start, really, because, when I was in primary school, when I was pretty young, there was a TV show on every week that everybody watched and talked about the next day. That was The Outer Limits. And there was like a different alien on TV every week, or a different monster or a different alien, or they called them bears. But the writers of the show said they had to have a bear in every episode, but it was an alien, some different type of alien. And they were very imaginative to my mind when I was a kid. But you look back at the shows now, they haven't aged well, a lot of the storylines and things in The Outer Limits. But all the kids collected the bubblegum cards. I've still got my set of 50 Outer Limits cards from
wow.
The 1960s.
Probably worth something.
I don't know. But then we were growing up through the space race. There was all of the Gemini project, all these on TV. You'd see the astronauts floating around with a big cable connecting them, and they're just floating around in space. The first spacewalk, I remember that very clearly.
Wow.
Then the Apollo missions came along, and of course they landed on the moon. I was in the 6th grade in primary school, and that was the year I read this book by Richard Tambling. And children don't naturally, you're not born with a scientific mind. You're not born to critically evaluate everything. You just accept what you see, what's going on.
Right.
And I was quite surprised years later when there was so much heated discussion about whether or not flying saucers were real. People were seeing UFOs and reporting them, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, that they're just imagining it." And I thought, "What's going on here?" You mentioned that I was with my sisters who were just walking down the street, and we saw this very strange thing happen in front of us. And I can't say 100% what we saw was UFO, but it wasn't an aeroplane. We saw what looked like 2 stars in the sky that weren't there the night before, and they were sort of above our street, and they separated they were just parted like this. One went south and then stopped and just remained there. The other one that went north, I watched it till it disappeared. It went around over the horizon, and it was silent. Don't know what it was, but it certainly fits the description of some kind of UFO activity, I guess.
Right. Well, what were you thinking when you saw it? Were you thinking UFO?
I don't think so. No. There was so many UFO cases that ended up getting into the news over the years that they started to make more sense. Especially when you have people with good credibility reporting what they've seen, and saying they don't have an explanation for what they just saw. So anyway, reading the first book I ever read about it, we'd heard of flying saucers just from science fiction. And when I saw this title, this book, Flying Saucers, Where Do They Come From? I had to read it. It was in our school library, and reading this showed me that it was just one report after another, a whole collection of reports from all over Australia, from places I'd never heard of, in Australia where people saw these things. And there's a few photographs in here in the book, a few classic UFO photos and things.
Daniel Fry, I think that's...
Yes, that's right. Yep. But also, I don't think there's any really uniquely Australian ones in here as far as photos go.
It's amazing that was in your primary school library. There were no UFO books in mine.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it just stood out. I had to read it, and it's the first book I ever really read, and it made an impact on me because it kind of tuned me in. Whenever there was a news report of a UFO or something, then I'd take notice, because they do happen all around the world. It's not just an American thing; it's all over the world, and we've had a lot of cases here over the years in Australia. This is a sketch of one that was over near a suburb in Sydney.
Oh wow!
It's like a ball with a series of balls around it.
That's unusual.
A place called Wollstonecraft, which I hadn't even heard of. It's somewhere in Sydney. But yeah, a lot of very interesting cases in that, and it just ignited my interest, and it just went on from there. So whenever UFO cases came in the news, excuse me, I just took notice. I couldn't not take notice, and I wasn't trying to discredit them all. Like some people just dismiss everything they hear about. Especially people that are scientifically trained, they want evidence. They want hard evidence. Most of them wouldn't believe that there was an alien spacecraft unless it landed on their head.
Exactly. I remember the first time I ever heard of UFOs was the TV series In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, I think.
Yeah.
And I dismissed it. I didn't believe it, not for a second. Yeah. And every now and then I'd hear it, but really it wasn't until I was 21 years old when I heard a report on the news. It made me scratch my head because my brother, it turned out, had seen a UFO. You got a little bit of a head start on me in terms of it hit me hard. I was not happy. But so I think probably it's easier if you grow up with it and know that there's something to this, because I had no idea. I could not believe it. There was a cover up and all these cases.
Right.
So you started just paying attention to it, and how did it become something that you started to really get serious with?
It doesn't happen all at once. One of my two sisters, who was with me when we had that strange sighting, told me years later that she'd had a sighting when she was a younger kid in primary school, the same school I went to, but before I started there even, she had this sighting, and it was a very clear description of what she saw. Excuse me, I can't clear my throat. There was a cloud, and there was what looked like something the size of a school bus, half of a school bus, sticking out of this cloud. It was a silver thing just sitting there, and it just went back into the cloud and disappeared.
Wow, that's more than just a light. That's amazing.
It was a daylight disc sighting, or maybe it was could have been a cigar-shaped object. I'm not sure, but she didn't tell me that till years later. one of several sightings that she has had.
Oh wow, so that's kind of interesting.
It's simply a lifelong interest. But if we want to move on to the main story we want to talk about, maybe we should.
Let's go there.
Well, where we lived, we weren't very far from the nearest airport. Just a domestic air not an international airport. No big planes, just light planes. A place called Moorabbin Airport. There's a town near where we lived called Moorabbin, but the Moorabbin Airport's nowhere near Moorabbin. It's in a different location. But anyway, we weren't too far from the airport, and we saw planes going over. I always like watching the planes fly past, and where we live here, we see planes all the time. Mainly light planes, aircraft, like Cessnas and Pipers and things like that flying around. But one day in 1978, so it's getting back now, it's 45 to 46 years ago that Fred disappeared. And just to give a very brief outline of the story, a young pilot hires a plane, wants to go down to a place called King Island and turn around and come back just to get some more flight hours up because he wants to become a commercial pilot. And the last thing he says is something's chasing him and bothering him, and then he and the plane vanished. That's a very short story. A lot of people have wanted to make movies or films about the case, but it's a very short story. Young man takes off in a plane, reports seeing something he cannot identify, then he disappears. So yeah, it's a very short story. But
this is a young man who, when he was a child, knew he wanted to be a pilot, right? He had grown up with that idea.
Well, probably not all of his life, but his dad took him on a joy flight in an airplane at the same airport that he ended up training at, Moorabbin Airport.
Okay.
It's considered, at the time, it was probably the busiest domestic airport in the Southern Hemisphere. That's the reputation it had. Anyway, we were seeing planes flying over all the time, you know. I don't know, but his dad took him for a joy flight, and as soon as he'd been up in a plane and had that experience, he decided, I want to do this. I want to be a pilot. I want to do this for a living. He joined the Australian Air Force Air Cadets to do his training. That photograph that I put on for you to show, that coloured photo of Frederick there, he's in his Air Cadet uniform in that photo.
Oh, there we are.
Yeah, he's got the Air Cadets uniform on. I'm not sure how old he was there, but his ambition was to get into the Air Force. Now, it's a very, very tough gig to just get into the Air Force. They only take the ducks of the school, you know, and Fred wasn't quite at that level. Academically, he wasn't quite at the level to get into he didn't quite get through the exams to join the Air Force. So he switched tactic and decided, well, I'll just become a pilot. I'll be a commercial pilot. I'll still be flying. He might not be flying around in fighter jets, but, you know, he wasn't a Top Gun guy, but he was very good at flying the plane. He used to take his girlfriend up and he used to perform acrobatics with her on board. And
Wow.
it used to frighten her. He had very good command over the controls of the plane, for sure. He was a very confident pilot. A lot of people these days try to blame him for what happened, like he somehow made this happen. Some people even say something which I just can't get my head around. They say, look, he had an interest in UFOs, and so it's funny how there's a UFO connection to this case where he disappeared, or as if he sort of made it happen. You know, you can go outside and look for UFOs, you won't see anything necessarily.
Right. So he did have an interest in UFOs prior?
Yeah. Well, if you're going to be flying up in the air, you've got to have a good understanding of what you may encounter while you're in the air. I'd say that's common sense.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the trainers at the base that he was learning to fly at is at a place called Sale in Victoria, in southern Victoria. There's an Air Force base down there, and he one of his friends down there said that he was common sense on two legs.
No.
So
no.
You know,
That's a nice compliment.
He had common sense, but he just wasn't quite bright enough, I suppose, or clever enough to get into the Air Force. It's very hard to get in. I don't think I'd be able to get into the Air Force, even with an extra, 46 years of life experience behind me. I still wouldn't be able to get in, But anyway, he was studying. He's sitting for his exams to become a commercial pilot. And one of the things you do is you've got to generate more air hours. You've got to fly around and you've got to get more experience to get your qualifications. And this flight was just a routine flight. No, actually, it wasn't a cargo. A lot of the documentaries have said he was on a routine cargo flight. Well, he wasn't a commercial pilot and it wasn't a cargo flight. And there was nothing routine about it, according to other people who I know who are involved in aviation. one of the last things you do is fly over the sea in a single engine plane alone.
Right.
Now,
So
a lot of people
here's
say
the airport, the Moorabbin Airport. I just pulled
that's
that up.
That's a good aerial view of it. Yeah, there's all these buildings in the foreground. None of those were there back in 1978. They've all been built up in the recent 20, 25 years or so. That was all an area where planes could be parked, or where you could do an emergency landing if you had to. Where I lived at the time was just over on the top, where all those houses are, the top right-hand side of that photo is roughly where we lived. So that's an area. That's an area called Beaumaris. That's where it was, Beaumaris, and Fred went straight over where I was. When that happened, it was 1978. I was still at home with my parents. I hadn't moved out of home yet. And a friend was coming over, and I just went out to just wait for this friend of mine to come along. And she was running a bit late, and I saw the plane go by. Now, there was nothing unusual about seeing a Cessna fly past. It just went from the left to the right. It was heading directly toward the setting sun from where I was, which is where Cape Otway is, he would have gone straight down over the Great Ocean Road, past all the surf beaches, and right down to a place called Cape Otway, where he would then turn to head down south to King Island. So I just saw him going past, and there was nothing unusual. However, something did happen when I was watching the plane. Now, I do write about this in the book, and I just pass it off as, look, it was just a thought that entered my mind. But where this thought came from, I have no idea. Was it my subconscious, or did I receive a message from the other side? I don't know, but I clearly got this instruction: keep your eyes on that plane, or don't take your eyes off that plane. That happened to me, and I thought, gee, that's odd. Where did that come from? But I watched the plane until it disappeared. It traveled until it disappeared behind the trees, because it was going a lot further than I was on the ground level, and it just, things disappear over the horizon. The plane just continued on its way directly on a straight line across the bay from where I was, Port Phillip Bay. And so the next day, there were news reports that I heard where they reported a plane has gone missing over Bass Strait, and it was believed that it had run out of fuel and crashed in Bass Strait, which is the ocean between Victoria and Tasmania. It's quite a long distance, that ocean.
Here are some of
quite
the
big
news reports.
Yeah. The document you've got there on the left-hand side is actually the missing aircraft accident report card that's been filled in there. And if you could zoom in on that, maybe you can't, but if you could zoom in on the one,
I can.
It should have the name of the owner of the aircraft at the top of that document, just at the top of that document.
Oh, all right.
Anyway, he was a doctor.
Cephas Day?
Yep, Cephas Day. He was the doctor in the local area where I lived, in Beaumaris. He was a doctor. He had a practice in, he was a GP. He had a practice in Reserve Road, and it even says on there, Reserve Road, Beaumaris.
Yep, 33 Reserve Road.
Yeah. Well, that house still exists. It's just a private house now. It's no longer a doctor's surgery. Now, I didn't know that doctor. I never went to him, but a lot of my friends did. But years later, I found out his son is a friend of one of my neighbours, and I know this guy's son, and I used to take photographs of his Norton 850 Commando in my neighbour's front yard. So that's a strange little connection that I didn't know about until just a couple of years ago when I was writing the book. The bottom of that is a bit of the transcript, I think, from the conversation. But anyway, that plane why I had that thought, I really don't know, but it was definitely keep an eye on it. When I heard news reports the next day that the plane had gone missing, I thought, I wonder if that's the same plane that I saw, where I had that idea I should keep my eye on it. I wonder if that's connected. And of course, it turns out, from what I've been able to find out years later, it definitely was that aircraft. The one I saw was the same colour. Of course, as soon as I published the book, a new photograph appeared, which nobody had access to before. That's that colour photo of the plane on the grass, which I sent you. You could show that photo. Yeah. Not that one. That's Moorabbin Airport with Fred standing next to it. That's a good picture.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
The one of the aircraft in colour, just sitting on the grass, it's at Tooradin Airport. It was the first one I sent you in that
There
group.
It is.
Yep.
Okay, let me pull that up.
Well, this photo has been just a private person's photograph. It's never been published at all. This photo was taken when the aircraft was brand new in 1968.
Oh,
and
wow.
That's the original paint job. You can see the registration number on the tail.
Yep.
And that's at a place called Tooradin, which is a local domestic airport, which would be probably, I'd say, 20 or 30 miles from where I live. And what I didn't realise, that's got black stripes down the side of the plane. It's got it's white with a blue trim, but black stripes. Those black stripes have gold pinstriping. It's a very nice looking plane, and it was brand new, a really good tidy little plane. There's another unusual connection I have to the case, which is that a school friend of mine rented that aircraft 2 years before it vanished and took my sister and a few friends down to Tasmania one weekend. And my sister borrowed my camera for that trip because she didn't have a camera of her own at the time. And so my camera went down to Tasmania in that plane that then disappeared 2 yees later.
Wow.
It's just crazy.
What are the chances?
It's kind of crazy. And my neighbour, Bob, his friend, Lionel, is the son of the guy who owned the aircraft.
Wow.
So, it's kind of weird.
Was circling around you this whole time.
Kind of strange. And I saw the plane on the day he disappeared, on his way to his encounter with the unknown, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, I have to just back up for a second because, you got that kind of a message. Have you had psychic stuff happen to you before? Premonitions or, anything along those lines?
Look,
that's pretty unusual.
It's very, very hard to say. Maybe sometimes when you're driving and you come around a bend, you think, I better be careful here. And then there's somebody in your way, that's, I think everybody has that sort of thing,
Sure.
But this was very clear, keep your eyes on that plane, or don't take your eyes off that plane.
Yeah.
I really can't really explain it. I've been thinking a lot about that, though. I've been watching a lot of videos about people who've had near-death experiences, and they all talk about spirituality and the possibility of being able to be contacted from people that are no longer with us or things like that. I just don't know. The thing was, though, that if you thought for 1 minute there could be, say, a higher being or a higher entity or somebody who can give you a warning, perhaps. Some people believe they have guardian angels and things like that.
Right.
My question would be, well, why didn't Fred get a message of, hey, it's not a good day to go out today. Why don't you turn around and go back and land,
Well, that begs the question. Did anybody find the plane or him?
No, nothing's been found.
Then you have to ask yourself another question. It's not why, but maybe he went with them. Maybe they picked him up and took him.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, that's got to be one of the theories floating around.
What, that he was picked up?
Yeah, by ET.
Well, just before we get down to that position, before we just keep that open for a minute, what I think is Fred might have got the same message I did. Hey, there's something dangerous or something not right, and he might have ignored it and continued on because he had an agenda, which was to get those flight hours up so he could get his qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted to be a pilot, a commercial pilot. He may have got a warning and ignored it. That's the only thing I can really reconcile myself with.
So he wasn't he wasn't carrying anything special in the plane or anything like that.
He had a like an empty ice box, a portable ice box. We call it an esky in Australia. There's a brand name. This one was like a picnic basket ice box thing. The story was that he was going to get some lobsters, which you call them lobsters. We call them crayfish. Same thing.
Right.
They had where that photo on the book was taken was a place called Crayfish Bay, which is right near Cape Otway. But there's a lot of fishing going on down at King Island, and the theory was that he was going to pick up some of these crayfish and bring them back. That was his mission, and there was going to be an officers' party that night, so he was getting the fresh crayfish for that trip. Well, he did have a few extra life jackets in the back of the plane. That was to conceal the icebox, because the people who rent planes out don't like you carrying seafood in the aircraft, because the plane ends up smelling like a fish shop. And see, they're trying to rent it out to people. They don't want it to smell like a fish shop. So he did have extra. And then people said, well, he was going to pick up some people at King Island and bring them back. But he didn't have any arrangement necessarily to even land on the island. You'd have to pick up the crayfish. But one of the gentlemen the guy who had the job of turning on the landing strip lights at King Island, his name was Brian Jones, and I've met him and spoken to him. He said that there was no instruction that he got to turn the landing lights on. He said that he checked and there was no all the crayfish had sold out earlier that day, like by lunchtime all the crayfish had been sold. And Fred was going down there in the evening, so he couldn't have been collecting crayfish because they'd been sold out that day. He may have had an arrangement to meet someone and pick it up. He might have prepaid for it and it was just waiting for him. That's a possibility. But he wasn't picking up any passengers, for sure. But there was an esky in the back. The icebox thing was in the back of the plane.
All right.
But that's a side story, really. The main issue is he was flying along.
Was it dark and messy?
Was it dark?
Yes.
When he was flying? Well, when I saw him go past, he was up in the sunshine. I was in the shade of all the trees. The sun was very low, and he was in the sunshine. But he took about 3/4 of an hour to get from where I saw him to Cape Otway. It's about a 3/4 of an hour flight. It's about a 4.5 or 5 hour drive to get down there. So you get down there pretty quick in an airplane. But he got down to Cape Otway right on 7 p.m. Now, we're pretty low in Victoria. We're geographically pretty low degrees wise, from the equator. We're pretty low down, about 32 degrees south. And so by October, you have a very long twilight period because of our southern location. You get a long twilight before it gets dark. If you live in Sydney, the opposite happens. It's daytime, the sun goes down, bang, it's dark almost straight away. It's ridiculous. I've noticed that whenever I've gone to Sydney and stayed there. One minute it's daytime, next minute, bang, it's black, it's dark. That doesn't happen down here. Down here, you do get a twilight period, especially that time of year in October. This is late October, so we're heading towards summer. Mm-hmm. And you get that long twilight zone period. So Fred literally flew into the twilight zone. He definitely did.
I have a question. I'm thinking about something. I'm curious.
Pathway, by the way. So
yeah,
people are wondering.
Pathway.
One of the things I'm curious about is I grew up in the Everglades in Miami, and I have people in my family who were pilots, and I was crazy for flying. And I also had shortwave radio, and I knew what frequencies to go to listen to the flights going over my head. And I just turned the thing on in the daytime and just listened to it while I was walking around. And we had a very bad crash of an aircraft in the Glades. We felt it when it happened, and I immediately went to the emergency channel to listen to the chatter about what was going on, and we realized what was going on. Was there people like that where you were, like, who would listen to radio transmissions? Did anybody else beside the tower hear him at all?
There was a lot of people in the room where the air traffic advisor was speaking to him, who were listening to the conversation as it was happening. One of which contacted the radar operator on the same airport and tried to get radar information. And the reply that came back was that they couldn't see anything on radar in that area. And that's why I titled the book "Nothing on Radar," because they checked at the time while the conversation was happening, and there was nothing coming back on radar. So he actually said there's a couple of.
Did they ask him for position? When you call an emergency, they want to know where you are. Did they ask him what's your position?
Well, when they called the radar guy, they said, "We've got this guy down at Cape Otway." So they located where he was.
Right.
They said, "Is that because he reached Cape Otway and he reported, DSJ Melbourne, I'm at Cape Otway, now proceeding to King Island." So they knew exactly where he was at 7 p.m. 6 minutes later, he called in and said, "Is there any aircraft below 5,000? And they said, no aircraft. And he said, "Well, I have, seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000. And so then they asked him to describe it. So they knew where he was, but they didn't have any radar returns. The radar operator said, "I've got a couple of returns from a bit further north than that, but nothing that I would say was an aircraft." So there was nothing coming back on radar from where he was. By the time he was asking about do you have any aircraft flying around where I am, was his question, they reported, "No, there's no aircraft in your vicinity. There's nothing there." And then he started to describe it. So by that time, he was about a third of the way to King Island from the mainland. It's about a half-hour flight from Cape Otway to King Island. That's about a half an hour stretch. And he was about a third of the way when he began talking to them. The conversation went for about 7.5 minutes, and then it was abruptly finished. And I believe at that point there was an aircraft collision. I think the two collided. And that would explain why the plane didn't actually hit the ground, or didn't hit the sea at all, I don't believe. But that's based on a report that came in from a farmer in another district who claimed to see a large 90 feet diameter, 30 yard diameter, 90-foot diameter object hovering above him the next day. That's in part 2, the second part of my book. Most of the people that cover this case never get to part 2. They don't even look at part 2, which is quite intriguing, which we can talk about later on. But he tried to describe this thing flying around him. He very clearly tried to describe, he said it looked like 4 bright landing lights. And he asked several times if there was any military aircraft in the area, because this thing was acting like a fighter jet, going very fast, coming and going very quickly, and he couldn't understand. It was so fast he couldn't get a good look at it. He said, I cannot affirm it gets such speed. So it was going so quickly he couldn't even describe what he was seeing.
Yeah, a Cessna, you got a wing over your cockpit, so it's hard to, unless they're right in front of you and you've got the windows that you can look out of, you can't look straight up in a Cessna at all. And so if it came over him, he couldn't follow it at all.
No. He actually began at that point to what they call orbit. He started orbiting, just going around in a large circle, so that he wasn't going to go off track where he was headed to, but he wasn't going to change his location generally, but he could look around for a while and see what's going on here.
Wow.
At one point he said, it seems to be playing some sort of a game. So this thing was coming in. Yeah.
This clearly wasn't a accidental thing. If it's circling around him and he's circling around it.
I think it ended up becoming an accidental collision at the end. But before that, this thing was coming and going. At one point he said, it's just vanished. And then Steve Roby says, he also said, it's just passed over me at least 1,000 feet above. And he was at 4,500. So then he said it's vanished. And then later he said, it's now, when he was asked to confirm that it was vanished, he said, it's now approaching from a certain direction. So he had to work out his direction because he'd been going around in a circle for a little while.
Wow.
And he had to get his bearings from his compass and work out where he was so he could answer the question. Right. Where is it coming from? But it disappeared and it came back. This thing was darting around very, very quickly. And
I would call that conventional aircraft of any kind, you know?
Well, one thing he says, I'll just go to his the transcript, which is in the back of my book, by the way. There's one part that really shows that he had trouble describing the thing, and he says that he asks again, is there any Air Force aircraft in the area?
Here's a picture of him next to the plane, right?
Yep, that's at Moorabbin Airport. Now, he said, Delta Sierra Juliet Melbourne, it seems like it's chasing me. What I'm doing right now is orbiting, and the thing is just orbiting on top of me also. It's got a green light and sort of metallic-like. It's all shiny on the outside.
Wow.
And then he says it's just vanished. And then Melbourne asks him what kind of aircraft is it. He says, he asks Melbourne, would you know what kind of aircraft I've got? Is there certain military aircraft? So he's trying to work out what it is, and he just has no idea what it is. Then they say, can you confirm it vanished? He says, say again. And then they say, is the aircraft still with you? And he says, that's approaching from the southwest. So he's got his bearings back. But then he says, my engine is rough idling. I've got it set at 2324, and the thing is coughing.
Uh-oh.
Now, that's kind of an engine trouble warning coming through. And Steve gets straight onto that. Steve Roby, the air traffic advisor. He's a fully qualified air traffic controller. In this case, he was only an advisor because Fred was flying in an uncontrolled airspace. That's just how it goes. He could only advise him. So Steve asked him, well, what are your intentions? Because he's reporting his engine's coughing. And I think Fred misunderstood the question. He just said, my intentions are to go to King Island. That was his flight plan. That's what everybody knew. But then Fred says, Melbourne, that strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft.
Wow.
And so then Steve answers, Delta Sierra Juliet. And then Fred tries to give him another message and gets interrupted mid-sentence. He says, Delta Sierra Juliet Melbourne. And then this funny noise starts. And that noise has been published. You might have heard it. That strange metallic sound started right there.
How long did it
interrupted? That goes for about 17 seconds.
Yeah.
And then stops. And what's interesting about that, there's so much hidden information in there that he must have had his hand on the microphone for that sound to even get transmitted.
That's right.
And he stopped talking. I believe that at that point when that noise started, I think the aircraft has become somehow connected to the side of this flying object, and the prop is still going at 2300 RPM, or what was it, 2,300 RPM, and it's cutting into the side of the thing, going chop, 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 chop into the side of this object that is now sort of attached or stuck to. And all that's based on this farmer's report from the next day that he saw this thing hovering over his farm and there was an airplane stuck to the outside of it, and it flew away with the airplane still attached, and he could read the registration number on the wing of the plane. Yeah, this is from the next day. This is the chapter in the book called Laurie. It's about this guy called Laurie Ryder who was interviewed, who recounted the story of this farmer. I've done a lot of research to try to find out who the farmer was because the name wasn't mentioned on this interview tape, and I was able to make a bit of headway after a long time. But that gets even weirder. But that's beyond the scope of our discussion, I think, really. But the thing is, Fred, there's no evidence that any aircraft ever hit the water. There was no wreckage ever washed up of Fred's plane. And the last thing he said was that strange object is hovering above me. It's not an aircraft. And the plane vanished. So it's a great mystery.
How many Air Force bases are near that area? Military bases?
Or where that happened, it's out over the sea, over the ocean. There's no military air bases around there. Military aircraft would be a heck of a long way from base to be out halfway between Tasmania and Victoria.
I assume there was a search for the aircraft as well, right?
Yeah, it lasted for about 6 days. They found a bit of oil, a bit of an oil slick. They got a sample, and it took them about 3 weeks to analyse that oil sample in those days. Marine diesel.
Oh.
So, all right. So not him.
It won't be anything to do with an aircraft, no.
Yeah.
If the aircraft hit the water, it would have broken up. Pieces would have broken off. Pieces float. Things get washed up. Nothing got washed up.
Right.
Nothing was ever washed up. About 5 years later, a piece of a Cessna air intake manifold was found 390 kilometres away from Fred's last known position. I've measured it on a map.
Did it have a serial number?
Yeah, it didn't match.
No. Okay.
But the skeptics jumped on that and said, oh, that's it. See, he's gone down in the sea. Well, these little aircraft, Cessna air intake manifold cowlings are only held on by a couple of pop rivets. They come free. They fall off. They fall out of the sky. They're quite regularly found missing when the mechanics do the aircraft maintenance. And where this one was found was over near Flinders Island, which is hundreds of kilometres away from where Fred was, and it was very near an airport landing strip on that island.
Okay.
I think it came from a different aircraft, and the numbers were similar series, but it wasn't a match.
Okay.
So I go into that in the book as well, so in quite a bit of detail. So yeah, it's an amazing mystery. We can talk about this farmer's sighting the next morning, if you like.
Yes.
Yeah, well, first let's take a quick station ID break because this is Absolutely. a good transition point. We're about here at the top of the hour. So I want to let you all know that you are watching The Light Gate, episode 48. I'm your host, Preston Dennett. My lovely co-host is Dolly Safran. Tonight we're talking to George Simpson, author of the book Nothing on Radar and the Frederick Valentich Disappearance. Is that right? I got that right?
Yeah. Frederick Valentich. It's a chip.
Valentich. Okay.
Yes, that's it. You got it.
I've been mispronouncing it the whole time. All right. And we've talked about all how George had got involved in the UFO field with an early sighting as a kid and how he read a UFO book in primary school, some of his family sightings and his pathway to finding out more about UFOs and his really interesting connections to the case itself. And of course, we heard the transcripts and the whole story of how all of this occurred. So quite interesting, and definitely check out the book if you want more info. We're still got a lot to talk about, But I do want to let you know that we are streaming live on United Public Radio Network at 107.7 and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3. Those are both FM streaming live from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana. We, of course, are also on a number of other platforms, including Roku and YouTube and Facebook. And that's it for now. Let's get back to our amazing discussion. Hoping to hear about some of your investigations, too. And you kind of intrigued me when you talked about that farmer and say there's some weird stuff going on with that. It's a little beyond the scope of our conversation, but gosh, we've got time. So,
which part are you talking about?
Like the farmer.
Yeah.
The farmer. Oh, well, okay. It's really there's a chapter in the book called Laurie. It's about a guy called Laurie Ryder, and he ran a hardware store in central northern New South Wales. He ran that for many years. He just had there was a lot of UFO sightings from the area that he was in, which is a town called Coonabarabran. It's a bit of a mouthful. Coonabarabran. Now, this area, they had a lot of UFO sightings. There's a lot of telescopes up there. There's a bit of a mountain and a lot of telescopes up there. A lot of people say it's a very strange area, a strange place. There's a lot of sightings that happen around Coonabarabran in New South Wales. Now, a good friend of mine, Bill Chalker, went there to investigate and speak to all of these witnesses about UFOs. And most of them said, you've got to go talk to Laurie. You've got to go talk to Laurie. And Laurie ran the local hardware store. Now, Laurie loved these UFO stories that people would say. He'd always ask his customers, have you ever seen anything unusual or strange? And if it was a UFO story, he'd write it down. He would document it in a journal. So he was keeping all these UFO reports in journals. Now, unfortunately, when he died, his children took all the journals and burned them.
Oh, no.
Everything was lost. But Bill Chalker visited him. He was still around, and Bill went to his place and did a tape recording and recorded him and asked him about all these sightings that had happened. And Laurie said on the recording, now I've got a copy of the entire audio recording, where Laurie basically says, look, there was a real mixed bag of these UFO cases over the years. He's got a lot of them. He said, but by far the most interesting one of the lot was a farmer who came into my shop one day. He said he got off this little ag bike. He said it was like a little sewing machine, those little tiny motorbikes. He said that he came into the shop and he came to buy something. And I asked him, have you ever had any unusual experience? Well, this farmer had moved up there from near Adelaide, a place called Murray Bridge in South Australia. When he was down there, which was the day after Fred went missing in Victoria, he was harvesting lucerne on his property with a harvesting machine for crop feed. And he heard this very strange whining sound. He thought his equipment had broken down, and it's driven by the tractor's engine. So he uncoupled it, and then he was going to check it and see if there's anything broken at the back. And he couldn't work it out because the sound continued, even though he disconnected it. And then he looked up, and there was this thing hovering above him. That's where the sound was coming from. And he said it was 90 feet in diameter. So 30 yards, 30 meters, whatever, a large object hovering above him. And a lot of farmers in his area do their own crop dusting. So a lot of them are pilots, and they have aviation knowledge. They understand that our understanding of aviation is you have to maintain airspeed or you stall and you're going to fall. This thing wasn't going fast enough. It was going, to his mind, slower than stalling speed, and he was under it. He thought this thing's going to come down
on his head. Yeah.
Well, it didn't come down, but just to be sure, general intelligence, instinct to survive, took over. He ran away from his tractor. He ran to the side to get clear of the edge of this thing in case it came down. Right? Survival instinct.
Yeah.
So from the side, he's looking up at this thing in the air. There is a photograph. I made up a mock photo to illustrate what he might have seen, and that's in the book, Nothing on Radar. There's this disc there, and he's watching it, and it's just sitting there, not going fast enough to remain up there, according to his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's slowly rotating. And what comes into view? It looks like a cross on the side, a white cross. It's the Cessna stuck to the side, to the outer edge of this thing. The whole plane.
Insane.
This is on the tape. You can hear him saying it. It's actually on. It's on YouTube. Laurie Ryder talking about this, and he says the thing was backed up, like the wings were stuck to the side, the tail hanging down, the engine up high. The wheels would have been sticking towards him, and you could see the engine. You could see the aircraft registration number on the wing. So he scratched it into his tractor with a nail, so he wouldn't forget the number. Now, when Laurie was telling Bill this, he couldn't remember what the number was. He said, "I've got it written down in a book somewhere back at my shop, and I'll get the number and I'll give it to you." It's the same number. It's VHDSJ, Delta Sierra Juliet, the plane that went missing the evening before. This is the next morning, but this is not in Victoria. This is in South Australia.
How far away is that?
It's about an 8-hour drive. It's 500 miles, 800 kilometres, 500 miles. And it's the next morning. Now, I've got a report from another person who was just a kid living in Adelaide at the time, who got woken up one morning, and his dad could only tell me it was October 1978. These kids were only like 5 or 6 years old. The two brothers got woken up in the middle of the night by this strange noise. And they looked out their window, and there was this object that was so big, it was over their house roof, but over the roof of the house across the road as well, this big circular thing. Yeah.
Wow.
And it had lights on it, and it's in the same time frame, and it was a funny noise. Now, it could be the same one, we don't know, but they didn't see any airplanes stuck on the outside. It was nighttime. But the farmer saw the plane and scratched the number into his tractor. I want to find the tractor with that registration number scratched into it.
That would be really interesting to know.
And then there was a big drought in the area, and the farmer found it hard to make a living, and he moved to New South Wales. They have a better rainfall than New South Wales. And that's when he told, that's where the story came from, the guy in the hardware store who recounted the message to Bill Chalker. So it's a bit of a long bow to draw, but it's a very interesting story. It would account for nothing being found in the sea, nothing getting washed up, if it flew away, stuck to the side of a flying saucer, a big one.
Then they were going to drop it off, and he saw them, and they decided not to because they try to do that when nobody else is around. They'll leave it.
The story gets really weird, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But anyway, the farmer said that it travelled over to an area where there were some military manoeuvres happening that day, that weekend. There's a military base, an army base not far from, it's actually it's in the Murray Bridge area. Now, I've got a UFO researcher friend you might have heard of, another fellow, his name's John Ockertell, and he has army connections. I asked him to look into this, and he confirmed there was an army exercise at Murray Bridge on that date, the day after Fred went missing. So Laurie was telling us the truth, or the farmer told him the truth, and Laurie just recalled the truth. And it's on the record, it's on the tape, and anyone can hear the tape. He says, it disappeared over to where the military manoeuvres were. It's hard to hear what he says with his accent, but and he talks pretty quickly, but it went over to the army base. And I've been past that army base. Now, there were guys out there running around shooting at each other, practicing, doing exercises or target practice or something. They may have seen something fly over. but there's never been any reports come out of there. Nobody's ever reported this from there. But the young kids that saw this thing in Modbury Heights in Adelaide, who got woken up by this funny noise, the farmer was alerted by the funny noise, this strange noise, because I think that the prop had damaged that flying disc somehow, and it was making a funny noise as a result.
Wow.
I have 3 questions, okay? My brain's working hard. You saw the plane on the side of that craft, and the nose was the prop on the nose, and did you notice if it had any damage to it anywhere, like impact damage?
To what, the plane?
Yes.
Well, you couldn't tell because it was backed up on the side of this thing, you see. It was just, all you could see probably wasn't damaged. He did say that there was oil running down the side of the aircraft. See, the propellers have a pitch control, which is hydraulic. And if the propeller's been chopping into the side of this metallic thing, it could have very well damaged the prop. And there would be oil going everywhere. And that's at the top. So the oil would have been running down. The farmer said there was oil. He also said the farmer said he couldn't see any ropes or any chains or anything. He couldn't work out why it was stuck there. It could be that there was a big field magnet of some kind. If it was a gravitational propulsion craft, the engine's the only part of a Cessna that's actually of ferrous material.
Right.
That could be attracted by a magnet. The rest of the plane wouldn't be because it's all aluminium.
Yeah. Well, now you're making me think this is human-built craft, not ET, because ET would have repelled his plane. It never would have crashed into it. They have a field around them that would have repelled it immediately. He would have crashed into the ocean, or he would have hit the ground if he had come in contact with a ET craft. And if he'd hit a military one that's back engineered, so to speak.
Well, that's interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because you guys would have heard of a guy called Gordon Liddy, wouldn't you?
G. Gordon Liddy.
Gordon Liddy. You'd know who he was, that he was involved in the Watergate. He was one of the guys who broke in to Watergate and all that. He came out to Australia in the early 1980s and went on a TV program. I know I talk about this in the book, but I didn't say who he was because he was still alive at the time when I published. Okay. And I don't want to get sued.
Right, you don't want to get sued.
Sure, understandable.
But he came out here and he went on a TV program called The Don Lane Show. Don Lane was an American who moved to Australia and had a Tonight Show based like the Johnny Carson show, but in Melbourne, in Australia. And he had this, Gordon Liddy came on his show, and to generate a lot of interest in the show, he said that he demanded an armed escort from his hotel for him and his wife to go into the TV channel, to go on TV live and tell us something about the Valentich case. And then he wanted an armed escort back to the airport. He was getting on a plane and leaving the country because he feared for his life, because what he was going to tell us was so interesting and so important, and we had a right to know about it.
That means that convinces me even more. Yeah.
I'm in suspense.
Yeah.
Right. Now, when he went on TV, he said that what happened to Frederick, it had nothing to do with aliens or a UFO. Right. He said it came from Pine Gap, which is an American base in central northern Australia, Northern Territory.
Right. We've got a question about that in chat, which I'll pop up later. Yeah.
He said we Americans, we have these drones that look like flying saucers. They're a circular craft. We have big ones and little ones. They're electrogravitic by nature. We can take them anywhere and do surveillance anytime we like, anywhere, and we probably won't even be detected. If anyone reports us, they're not going to believe the reports because nobody believes in flying saucers. So these things have impunity. They can go anywhere. He said one day the big one came back with an airplane stuck to the side of it, and the pilot was still inside it, and he was okay. He's now part of our program, and he's not allowed to talk. He's not allowed to have anything to do with he's not allowed to contact his family or anything because he's now part of the top secrets, and it had nothing to do with aliens. I think that was all a CIA story that was made up so that Australians wouldn't think that Fred disappeared after encountering an alien spacecraft. That's what I think. But
wow.
I think it was a CIA story, but that was on Channel 9. Now, one of the producers of that program confirmed to me that it was Gordon Liddy, and it took me a long time to find out who it was. As soon as I heard it was Gordon Liddy, I
can honestly tell you from my
okay.
experience flying, I know how craft work, ET craft, and there's no way it would have crashed into an ET craft, and they would never, I mean, it just never would have happened. They would not have played with it like that either. They would not have caused this young man to crash on purpose unless they were going to lift him off. Okay. So.
Yeah, but why would the government do something like that?
Because, do you really want my opinion on it? I don't think I'm going to say it out loud. Just put it this way. There are entities within entities within entities in the military, and nobody tells anybody anything. And this can happen here, and one person knows what it's right about it or wrong about it, and then everybody else is totally clueless. They don't have a chain of command like you think they would in instances like this. And if it was a drone, it was probably either manned or unmanned. If it was unmanned, nobody got hurt, and they brought this kid back to the base. Sure, they would have taken him in. It would have been a MyLab, instantaneous MyLab on this poor kid. So,
well, look, we can only speculate, can't we? Because we don't know.
Yeah.
Levels and levels to this.
But it is very, very interesting, though, that this farmer described this happening.
Yeah.
He said that he went into town later that day after seeing the thing fly away with the plane stuck on the side. He went into town, and a neighbour came up to him and said, I see you doing some more crop spreading. He said, no, why do you say that? He said, well, what's the Cessna doing in your top paddock? And he said, there's no Cessna in my top paddock, mate. He said, yes, there is. I was down there this morning and I saw it down there. He said, well, that's interesting. So when I go home, I'll have a look, and he went up to where his airstrip was at the end of his property. Yeah. And he said there was tyre marks in the grass and a pool of sump oil at the end of the tyre marks, but there was no sign of any aircraft, but something had been there.
Wow.
That was later in the day. So it's a very strange end to a very unusual story.
It's incredible. Maybe someday, if he is alive and he's being held or whatever, maybe someday he'll get away from him and come out. You never know.
I hope so. So I want to bring up a photograph before we get too far along, which you sent, which I'm curious about.
Mm-hmm.
Is this related to the case in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. This is this photograph is on the cover of the book. This photo was taken by a fellow who was on holiday down there, a guy called Roy Manifold. He was on holiday. This is Crayfish Bay, this beach, and it's very close to Cape Otway. And it was taken about 15 to 20 minutes before Fred flew into this area in the photo. Now, if you zoom in on that strange blob in the sky, have a good look at that. Tell me what it is. I'd like to know. Look, how would you even describe that if it was flying around you in the sky? What is that?
Yeah. Well, sometimes cumulus nimbus clouds will pop up like that. They'll just be one little blob of.
That's not a cloud.
I know, but it could be. It's a grainy photograph. You can't totally tell. But it has a form on the bottom of it that's interesting as heck. That would be a type of drone in that picture.
Well, there's a big cloud of blue sparkly dots next to it on its left-hand side.
Yep.
Which is some kind of energy field or something, people have said. Scientists have said that it looks like an energy field around it, which they can't explain. One part of the transcript we didn't get to, where Fred described this thing, I'll just get to this part from the transcript. Yeah, this is where he's describing that object that you just looked at. He says he seems to be playing some sort of game. He's flying over me 2-3 times at a time at speeds I could not identify.
All right.
So how that's
Yeah.
How can something fly over you 2-3 times at a time at speeds you cannot identify? I don't know of any man-made craft that can fly around like that can do those sort of maneuvers.
He's going counterclockwise to him. It can seem faster than it really is. Perspective is everything when you're flying, you know that. And and he's looking up and he's under stress, and it can appear that way. Those drones, those military drones that I know about, can go up to 2,000 miles an hour, and they don't break the sound barrier when they do, and it kind of freaks me out. Okay, so I don't know.
There's a lot made of behind the scenes that we just don't know what's going on with this.
What are they made of? Yeah.
So here's another photograph. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the memorial?
Yeah, well, that's Steve Roby. There's a whole chapter about the memorial in the book because that memorial disappeared for a while. We thought it had been stolen, but actually the family took it in to do some maintenance to upgrade it because it's out in the weather there. It's out in a lot of weather. But the family haven't been able to, it's an open case still. They haven't been able to have a funeral service. There's been no closure for the family.
Oh my goodness.
In 46 years.
So he's not been declared dead. He's still missing.
He's still missing. No, there's no body being found. They can't have a funeral without a body. There's no wreckage found.
How old was he, by the way? He was pretty young man.
40. He and I were born in the same year. He was 2 months older than me. He was 20. He was just a kid. And all these people that say, he was a bad pilot, he'd made a few aviation mistakes. Well, everybody does that when they're learning.
Right.
He flew into cloud and got reprimanded for flying into cloud at one stage. I mean, gee, the clouds are up there. How can you not fly into cloud when you're flying a plane? It's ridiculous.
So here's his father. Did you ever get a chance to talk to
I got to know Guido really well because Guido used to come to the UFO meetings and he was still looking for answers. Unfortunately, he died in early 2000. He never got any answers. His wife is still alive. I speak to her sometimes, Alberta. I've met Fred's younger brother a few times. We were on a documentary together. I've met one of his sisters as well. It's a very strange thing. Fred's birthday and his twin sisters and his mother all have their birthdays on the same day.
Wow.
It's kind of weird. But anyway, they're really nice people and they've always been just looking for answers and they've never had any answers.
Yeah, there's a weird kind of similarity to Felix Moncla, who disappeared over Lake Superior after being vectored to a UFO. It's another possibility where someone was, because they never found that plane either.
Yeah, right.
And there's quite a few cases actually from throughout the 1950s. There was a number of them.
Where would you hide a Cessna? If I wanted to hide a Cessna, I'd put it on the other side of the moon, wouldn't you? on the far side.
Gosh, I hope
where I'd put it.
One day we're going to go to the moon and there they'll all be.
That photograph you showed of the plaque with the man standing there, that's Steve Roby in the photo there. He's the last man who spoke to Fred.
Right. Okay.
That's at Cape Otway where the plaque is. And that's Steve Roby about 4 or 5 years ago standing there. His wife took that photo and he's given me permission to use it. So I put it in the book.
He was the guy who was in the tower.
He was the guy talking to Fred on the day, speaking to him, asking him, "What's your height? Where are you? Can you describe the aircraft?" All of that. That was Steve. That's him there.
Boy, it's such a heartbreaking case. I can imagine how this must be for the family.
There's no disclosure. There's no closure for the family at all. It's very tragic. I'd love to find the plane somewhere. There were some divers. There was a guy who claimed that some divers had found the plane at the bottom of Bass Strait, but it never came to anything. They were never able to prove it. no evidence ever came of it. So it was just another story. But they tried to get thousands of dollars out of the Valentich family to have a look at the photos that they supposedly had, but they wanted the payment first. The family just had to ignore it, and good on them.
That's heartbreaking. Well, can we bring up a few questions from chat while we still have time?
Yeah. Sure.
First, let me just give a shout out to Aussie Jen for the super sticker. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right. And Dolly, this one's for you. And this is kind of a blindside, but Rick Schatz is asking, Dolly, do you get any psychic impressions of what happened?
I'm not trying to. I'm completely staying out of it. Okay. There are just some places I won't go, and this is one of them. Okay.
I don't blame you for that.
Yeah.
All right. So here's another interesting comment, which is from Tom, who says, in the Unsolved Mysteries episode of Frederick Valentich, they showed a witness walking along the beach that saw 2 green UFOs. I seem to remember hearing about other witnesses.
It was one green light following the plane. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I suppose you've heard of that then.
Yeah, that was just as the plane was heading towards Cape Otway before he turned. He hadn't reported seeing anything yet at that point. So they saw the plane go past and something was following it with a green light. But Fred didn't actually report anything until 6 minutes after he left Cape Otway, which was interesting. It was well out to sea when he started saying, "Oh, do you have anything below 5,000?" And I said, "No, non-aircraft."
Well, we don't have a whole lot of questions, but there are a couple of more which are kind of interesting. Here's one from Kayleen Gwynmither. She says, I was living in Queensland when this happened, and the mainstream media reporting caused an increase in interest in UFOs. What is George's opinion on the interest in UFOs in response to this case?
Well, this case got international response. This story went around the world.
Yes, it did.
When
it happened. I heard of it when I was younger, yes.
I was 13, so I wasn't even a believer.
I was 21, so yeah.
Right. Well, the local UFO group here in Melbourne were inundated with international phone calls for about a week as a result of this going through the news. It was major headlines that a pilot reported this thing and then disappeared. That's quite unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I don't think there were, that's something that was like brand new back then. I don't think I heard ever of anything like that, aviation wise before that, where a pilot's looking at something in the sky and you don't know what it is, and then poof, they're gone, Yeah. And it was a strange transmission. Really
How many others are there like this? Not many.
Yeah. None really quite like this.
Yeah.
No.
All right. Well, here's another question from Pete Penn, which we kind of touched on a little bit. Please ask George about the sightings near Pine Gap. Thanks to you two for being here every Monday. Of course, Pete, we love doing it. And Pine Gap, I guess, is kind of like Australia's Area 51. Would that be a comparison?
It's kind of like that. It's an American base.
Oh,
Pine Gap is it's a top secret. It's so top secret, nobody's heard of it.
Yeah.
Right?
They have bases like that all over the world, just saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's an American base, and that's where Gordon Liddy said this drone came from.
Right.
It's a heck of a long way to go from there down to Murray Bridge to collect an aircraft.
So is there a lot of UFO activity around that particular area?
You do get quite a lot of sightings come from there. People around that area have taken photographs of these unusual things flying in and out of the base, and the photos have been confiscated.
Yep.
Typically. Yep. Yeah, but it's top secret military, so they get away with that.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. Here's a question which is super easy to. Oops, I lost it. Naturally. Oh, here it is. Fun Talks TV. Was this the first case of UFOs in Australia? I don't think so.
No. They go back over 100 years. UFO cases. My grandmother had a UFO case. She didn't even call it a UFO. She was out in her backyard one day, sweeping the pathway in her backyard, and she said there was 2 Zeppelins hovering above her backyard, a silver one and a gold one. Now, there were no airships flying around Melbourne in the mid-60s. This is in the early to mid-1960s when this happened to my grandmother. And her exact words were they must have been cleaning the engines or something, because a drop of hot oil came out of one and came down and landed on her cheek, just below her eye, her left eye. And I've got photos of her when she was a young lady. She had a mole there. She said this hot oil landed on the mole, and for the rest of her life there was no mole there. The mole got burned off by this hot oil. And she told me that many years ago, and she was in her 80s when she was telling me that. She also told me that one day there was a knock at her front door, and there were 2 men in black suits with black hats standing at the front door. And she said to them, "What do you want?" She said they forced the door open and didn't answer her, and walked past her and walked right through the house and out into the backyard, which is where she was when this mole had been burned off her face. And she went into the backyard to follow them, and they had just gone. They disappeared. They never answered her. They just walked through the house and into the backyard. Their car would have been out in the driveway, I guess. So they went out to look for something in the backyard, and then they left.
That's insane. Wow.
And that's my grandmother. I've got to believe her.
There's a lot of back engineering going on for a long time, and almost every major country was involved in it and has been. France, everybody, England, Australia, some places in South America. And America has those bases everywhere. And people don't realize how much involved our country is with all of this worldwide. And it's just now starting to be understood that Americans have, what's the word? Choreographed a lot of the activity. And Australia, as a matter of fact, is one of those places where they were doing a lot of test flying. I know that. And y'all got to see all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, I'm in communication with a guy from Australia. I'm hoping to talk to him shortly, who had a really incredible encounter. He says the government has not been helpful at all with this subject, which, of course.
Yeah.
It's a crazy big universe, The guy who runs SETI, I've forgotten his name offhand.
Stephen Greer?
No. The guy who runs SETI.
The other SETI.
Yeah.
Okay.
The official one. Anyway, he was on TV here saying that we used to think that there was like 1 in 5 of our stars throughout the universe have a planetary system. And then he said, now we think it's 1 in 3. And that was years ago. It's probably, I think by now they've considered that every star in the solar system has planets.
Something. Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And there's so many possibilities of there being life just like planets like ours, and why wouldn't they come here,
Exactly.
All right, I got a couple of more questions, and one is kind of a tangent. It's kind of off topic, but we always say any questions okay. So I will pull it up. It's from Sharon, and she's asking, has any experiencer, including yourselves, ever verified the Ivan 013 videos, aka Skinny Bob? I've looked at them. I'm skeptic. I think the Skinny Bob is probably just, I don't know, CGI. How could we tell if it's real or not? But as far as I know, I don't know anyone who's been able to verify that is real. The Skinny Bob videos?
Yeah, it's consistent with what people report. People who've had these abduction experiences report these skinny guys. I knew a lady who unfortunately died just a couple of years ago after COVID, but she died of cancer just a couple of years ago. Lovely lady, and she was an experiencer for many years. Used to go to the groups that I used to go to. she said that the main one, there was like a group of these guys who'd come and take her away and bring her back again. And the main one was a very, very skinny one. She just called it the lanky one, I think she called it. The long, tall, lanky, skinny one. Which is consistent.
There are photos out there.
Consistent with the skinny Bob, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think we really have enough knowledge to say if somebody knows if it's real or not, but I'm sure our governments have all kinds of photographs.
Well, It seems like somebody or something has been playing with the human genome for many years. There's a lot of weird things going on nowadays that didn't happen in our grandparents' day. I'm telling you.
Right. I don't know. I have a great grandmother who is from Sweden, Sverige, and she told me she saw UFOs. She didn't call them that either. She just called them craft, which I find funny because that's how I refer to them now. And she said on multiple occasions she was a Same, Laplander, and as a small young girl, and they just took it in stride and went, "Oh, look, there they are." And this was in the 1800s, so late 1800s. So.
All right. Well, I've got one more quick question, and we kind of already covered this. This is towards you, Dolly. With your experience as a contactee, is it possible a collision like this might be possible? Shouldn't there be a productive bubble or something? Fun Talks is asking.
It's
basically
impossible.
Already said no. So,
yeah, no. Craft have two fields, one inner field and one outer field. The inner field takes care of the craft itself, and the outer field protects the craft from anything coming at it. It also helps them skiff on the magnetic field lines. It would repel anything at it, even a bullet. Nothing can penetrate that field. It is high graviton energy surrounding it in plasma. There's no way. So I'm erring on the side of that craft was some sort of drone. It may have been remotely operated. That's why it happened, because the operator wasn't fast enough to avoid the collision. And if the plane stuck to it, it probably would have landed right away, ergo going into the field to try to help the guy in the plane to see if they killed him. And then it would have tried to get out of there and go away. Especially if it was military, they needed to clean that up and get it gone as quickly as possible.
Well, I did a chapter in one of my books about UFO collisions. There's some with cars, and because the Pentagon is saying, "Oh, these UFOs are flying around. It's dangerous. There could be a collision." There's been near misses, and I found almost none. There was one case over Mexico City, I think, where 3 UFOs came and basically lifted a small plane and carried it a short distance.
Yeah, they probably EMP'd it by accident and held it stasis till they could get it to somewhere safe. They won't let anybody die on purpose. They're weird about that. You can't get too close to a craft either. If its emitters are facing you, it'll knock all your electrical systems out in a second. And if that would explain why they grabbed him and flew him off. So.
You know about the Knowles case?
Yes, Faye Knowles. And
the car got lifted up off the road. And
that's right.
There's actually a cinema movie film being made about it at the moment.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Is that right?
Oh. Yeah.
I'll be first in line to watch that one. So we've covered the case pretty good. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? Because I'm also interested in your investigations that you've done with other cases.
Right. It's usually the same sort of thing. People report what they've seen, nobody believes them, and then it turns out it's on the news. Other people saw it too, and so they're verified. Things like that.
So you haven't had any up close encounters reported to you?
Only this lady I spoke about before. This lady whose name was Diane, who she was actually she had her first encounter in Italy when she was a teenager. And their family moved out to Australia, and then these things started visiting her. She thought they were ghosts visiting her house because they came through the walls. They just flooded in through the walls. She thought they were ghosts. Yep. One day she had the TV on in the background with the sound down, and she was in her kitchen doing something. And then she saw these things that looked like the ghosts. And it was a documentary on Bud Hopkins showing his artists had done drawings of these creatures that looked like the cover of Communion. you know.
Yeah.
And that they'd come in through the walls, and she saw, hey, they're my ghosts. So she watched the show. That's how she discovered they were aliens visiting her. She thought they were ghosts. That's a very interesting case. And her name was Diane Karachi, but she's no longer with us, unfortunately. She wouldn't have gone on a show to talk about it either. She wouldn't even rarely go to meetings. She didn't want to sort of be ridiculed by anybody, but she had these things going on in her life here in Australia.
Wow.
So moving from Italy to Australia had no effect. She couldn't get away from them by moving to Australia.
I'll figure that.
It's a worldwide phenomenon. Yeah.
Well, in Australia now, are people talking about UFOs, UAPs more now? Is it more accepted, in your opinion, or?
Oh, look, it's really interesting. The public have changed their view. They're not as skeptical as they used to be because of the 2017 admission from the US Navy that they actually have a clandestine study group of UAP, although they're trying to backpedal right now. They did admit that they study UFOs and take them seriously because they're flying around up there and they're encountering them. They are a real phenomenon. So if I wear my jacket that's got Australian UFO Research written on the back, if I take public transport, people will come up to me and say, "Look, is that real? Is that really real?" They don't criticise or laugh anymore. They actually ask me the serious question: "Is there something to it?" And I say, "Yeah, there sure is." So the attitude has changed in the public eye. They're a lot more willing to look at. It's not. It's not the tin foil hat brigade. It's something really, really true going on.
Wow.
They're starting to think like that, which is probably why right now the authorities there in the States are trying to backpedal so hard. But the cat's out of the bag.
Thank goodness.
Everybody knows now that this is a real phenomenon.
Well, the Valentich case is easily, I think, Australia's most famous case, but you're from Melbourne, and that's right where the Westall case happened, which is probably Australia's also very close. Did you have any memory of when that happened? That was 66, right? You would have been pretty young.
I was in, I think, grade 1 or 2 in primary school that year, grade 2. And I remember hearing nothing about it, except there was a thing on the news one night on the news. And there was these two girls being interviewed, and the interview got cut off mid-sentence. Somebody off camera said, "Nope, this interview is over," and that went to air. And that's the footage that nobody can find nowadays. That footage has gone missing. That's in the Westall documentary. They talk about they tried to find the Channel 9 footage. I saw that live to air when they showed it in 1966.
Wow,
that footage, yeah. So the students were being interviewed, and they were told to shut up live on camera. And that was Joy Clark, was one of those two girls in that interview. Now, I tried to find these UFO witnesses for years, and eventually I went to a couple of their school reunions and met them all, and I know a lot of those witnesses, and they're all our age. We're all roughly the same age, and they were in high school or primary school when that happened. And that every time they have a school reunion, all they talk about is the day they saw the flying saucer.
Wow.
Now, people say, "Oh, no, it was just a weather balloon." Well, if I see a weather balloon, I'm not going to be thinking about it in 50 years' time.
Right.
It's just a weather balloon.
Right.
These people saw this thing that was unusual, and it performed. What Joy says, when it left, it was sitting there and it turned side on like this, and it just shot straight up. In a split second, it was in space.
When she described that, I knew it was real, because so many witnesses I've talked to describe how the craft will lift up, turn sideways, and off they go.
And you're gone in a split second. Right. I've got a really good case that I investigated myself personally, which hasn't really been published very much at all, maybe in one of our magazines over here. Was a guy who was a guy called Laurie was writing his memoirs in his 70s. This is about 20 years ago now. And he said he was going to include this UFO sighting he had in his memoirs. Then he realised he'd never actually reported it. So he reported it to the Australian UFO Research Network, and it came to me because it was a Victorian case. And I rang him up and spoke to him on the phone, and it was a great case. He was saying goodbye to his friend. He lived, he was in a place in Brunswick in Melbourne.
Right.
And he was just riding home on his bike, and it was just getting dark. And he thought he must have had a flat tire because there was this vibration coming through his bike. And he actually stopped the bike and got off and checked the tires, and they weren't flat. I thought, that's strange. And he got back on the bike and started riding again. This vibration thing started again. And he said it was like, when the school bus is sitting there waiting and the engines are just running, but they're not going anywhere, the diesels are idling, the sides of the bus can just start vibrating because of the rumbling of the motor, and you get a resonance and it vibrates. That was the sort of thing he was detecting while he was riding his bike. The next thing that went through his mind was he thought a truck or a car or bus or something was about to run him over because they didn't have their lights on. He couldn't see any lights. But that was the same vibration as what comes from a truck or a bus or something. And he looked around. There was no other traffic on the road. And then he looked up, and there was this thing hovering above the rooftops. And he stopped the bike. And this thing was just hovering above the rooftops. And this is in the about 1952, 1953, he said this happened. So before my time. And he said that as he watched it and he could feel the vibration coming from this thing, he said it had windows, and it was windows at one end and it was glowing at the other end. And it was like a cigar-shaped thing just hovering over the roofs, just going across the suburbs slowly, much like that huge wing in that Arizona case. Anyway, he was just sitting there, and he's looking at this thing, and it's just sitting there. And he said if he blinked, he would have missed it. In a split second, it went from just over the houses. It was up in space, in orbit, in a split second, and there was no sonic boom, no wind noise, nothing. And he was glad he hadn't blinked, or he would have missed it. I asked him how big was this thing. He said, "Well, do you know the Russian Antonov cargo plane?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, it's 3 times bigger than one of those. 3 times the size of an Antonov." This thing was massive.
250 feet.
And in a blink, it was gone.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how many people are inside that thing, or ETs.
Well, he turned around and went back to his friend who just left. He's going home for tea. It was dark, and he went back to see his friend. His friend hadn't gone inside yet. His friend was just staring at the sky with his mouth open.
Yeah, he probably saw it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good case.
Well,
that is a good case.
You might have to write another book, George.
No.
Duchess wants to be on the show. She always comes right before we get on.
What kind of a dog have you got there?
She's a Great Dane. Yeah. 135 pounds of Great Dane. Yes.
Wow.
Long legs. Beautiful. Oh my God.
Beautiful.
There she goes. It's time for her to go outside.
Thank you for giving me so much time, time on this case here to spend with you talking about this. It's a case that's really, I was thinking about it for 40 years before I wrote the book. So
amazing. I wonder, did the family ever consider seeing a medium or a psychic to get information that way?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think they were quite skeptical of that sort of stuff. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I can understand.
They just want to find either the plane or some trace of this missing boy,
Gosh, he's out there somewhere. I mean, either if he's passed on or not, something happened.
Yeah, we just don't know. We still don't know.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I sure do hope one day we do. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
It's an enduring mystery.
It sure is.
That's so. It's amazing to me that you're the one who's telling the story with all the symmetry of the story itself, and your 2 degrees of separation from everybody. That's incredible. It's like you were in the right place at the right time to be the one to bring the story out, And it seems
it's
to me like
kind
you've
of
done a really good job of, researching it. That's amazing.
It's like its mission is to get the story out. I look at it as this: a lot of pilots especially like to attack Fred and say he was a bad pilot and he didn't know what he was doing and it was his fault. I just have to go and defend him. That's all. I just feel like I'm always going into bat for Fred, because they can say whatever they like when he's not around. It's really quite cowardly of them, I think.
Yeah.
Well, he did the right thing. He started circling instead of going further out into the water. He was circling. He stayed in place. He was spotting it. He was talking calmly on the radio to them. He was doing every responsible thing he could do. That's not a bad pilot, not at all. He was a very courageous pilot, matter of fact.
And his plan was to continue on to King Island, which he tried to do, and he didn't get there.
Well, I have to encourage everyone to check out the book because it's getting great ratings.
Absolutely.
Reviews on Amazon, which is pretty unusual because a lot of books don't get such good reviews, but definitely the readers are loving the book. So
that's great. That's
definitely check it out. These are all
library in your library. Yeah. It's awesome. Like a reference. That's awesome. Because
it's an important case.
Things that I didn't know. I've only heard little bits of information from this story. I remember when it happened. I remember registering it in my brain and thinking, wow, this is really interesting. But I didn't hear any more than a pilot disappeared with the plane, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That's it. So
no, it's a very interesting case. Do you guys know about reverse speech?
I do. I'm not sure I'm a believer in it, but I've certainly heard of it.
Well, I went to a barbecue once and somebody wanted to try out a reverse speech tape recorder, and they handed me the mic and said, "Here, say something." And I spoke into the mic and I just said, "Look, I just went to a UFO conference, had a great time." I told them about cases in Victoria and they hadn't heard of them and had a really good time. As I was saying that, another thought went through my mind, but I didn't say it. A thought went through my mind, which was, I thought I would be nervous because I was giving these talks here to strangers interstate. And they played the tape backwards and it was a lot of gobbledygook. And then everybody who was at the barbecue heard me saying on the tape when it was played backwards, I thought I would be nervous.
Yeah.
Right. And I was...
You transmitted it to magnetic tape. You actually put it there.
It was on a tape. Now, I was shocked because I knew I had just had that thought, but I didn't speak it. I was saying something else at the time, but when they played the tape backwards, it came out as, I thought I would be nervous. And
which way it went on. So that's very, very cool. Yeah.
To me, that was a demonstration that this stuff works. Now,
yes, it does.
This Valentich, this tape where the farmer is talking about this craft, and he talks about the farmer coming into his shop, but he doesn't say the guy's name. 10 years ago, I figured I should reverse that bit because that's when the thought of the guy's name's going to go through his mind, but he hasn't said it. It's not on the tape. So I reversed that part of the tape and a name popped straight up. Right? A clear name popped up. Now, the son of the guy who was in the recording, who's telling the story, is no longer alive, but I'm in contact with his son. And just middle of last year, I contacted his son and I said, "Look, it sounds like your dad said," when I played a bit of the tape back, it sounded like your dad said the name Ian Bryson. He said, "Oh, he was a farmer. He was a friend of my dad's. Our kids played together and I even bought a car off him. I think he's the guy you're looking for." So I got the name confirmed.
Yeah.
I only got the name by reversing this tape, and I've got confirmation of the farmer's name.
Right.
And that's not
is very weird.
That's not in. That's not in the book because I've had to write an extra chapter, which I now have to add to the book, which goes into this reverse tape.
Right. Well, we're at the end we're running out of time. We've got a couple of minutes.
2 minutes.
You want to give out any information? We've got your Facebook link in the show notes if anyone wants to reach out to you.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right.
I'm happy to talk to people and discuss the case, or anyone who's read the book. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions they might have if they've read the book. Yeah, no
Very
problems.
cool.
It's all open.
Well,
But I
thanks
do
very
have
much.
to. I have to add another chapter to the book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would put that in, the reverse tape thing. I would put that in. That's incredible. I mean, it's like confirmation, you know. Sometimes when I have psychic impressions on things or I see things, I don't take them at face value right away. I wait for confirmation. And like the other day, I can't tell you the whole story what was going on, but I had somebody visit me, and then I find out from 2 different places who managed to call me that day and ask me what's going on and why is this. And I'm asking, what do you mean? And they confirmed the visitation from the person. Right. And I was like, well, okay, well, then it's really happened, you know? So,
well, we do have to say goodbye, or otherwise we're going to not fit into the archives.
Okay.
Thanks very much, George.
Yes, thank you very much for coming. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone in chat who donated and just came to hear our guest tonight. Kim King says, need this book. Yes, you do.
Yep, Amazon. Okay.
Such a great mystery. Congratulations on the book. George is a great storyteller. George is such a great speaker. Yeah, people in chat are absolutely loving you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, this is the our edition tonight of the Lightgate. We love the fact that you show up and you help us, and we like to bring you good content. And tonight was really good content. We're coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans, in Louisiana, at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. I want you all to have a wonderful week. Namaste. Love everybody. Good night.